Marco Benedetti had been working at the same pizzeria for 12 years. Perfect pizza dough, authentic Italian flavors, the chef customers loved. He spoke kindly with a French accent and practiced his art in the kitchen. Until that Saturday night when a Mafia conflict broke out in the restaurant. That's when 9 armed men realized this chef wasn't just someone who made pizza, but a legendary operator who had served 14 years as a tactical operations specialist in French GIGN. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we begin this incredible culinary combat and hidden identity story, tell me in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button. These stories must not be forgotten. In the heart of Little Italy, New York, stood Bella Notte Italian restaurant. Red checkered tablecloths, soft candlelight, and the constant aroma of fresh basil and melted mozzarella. For 12 years, the soul of this restaurant had been Marco Benedetti. Marco was 45 years old, medium height, dark hair streaked with silver, always wearing his white chef's coat. What made him unique wasn't just his culinary skills, but his unusual accent, French words mixed with Italian passion. Bonsoir, mes amis. He would greet customers warmly. Tonight I make for you the most beautiful pizza. Yes, customers loved Marco. His pizzas were legendary in the neighborhood. Thin, crispy crust, fresh ingredients, and a secret sauce recipe he claimed came from his Italian grandmother. But what intrigued people most was his story, an Italian chef who spoke French. I learned cooking in France, he would explain simply when asked. Beautiful country, beautiful cuisine. Marco's daily routine was precise, almost military in its organization. He arrived at 3 p.m. every day, checked all ingredients, prepared his dough with mathematical precision, and set up his station with obsessive attention to detail. His kitchen was immaculate, every knife in its exact place, every tool cleaned and positioned perfectly. The other staff sometimes joked about his perfectionism. Marco runs this kitchen like the army, laughed Tony, the head waiter. Everything must be perfect, Marco would reply with a smile. No shortcuts in good cooking. The restaurant owner, Salvatore Romano, had hired Marco 12 years ago and never regretted it. Business had tripled since Marco's arrival. He's an artist, Salvatore would tell people, but also very, professional, never panics, always calm. What Salvatore and the staff didn't know was why Marco was so calm under pressure. They didn't know about the small scar on his left shoulder, hidden under his chef's coat. They didn't know about the precise way he held his knives, not like a chef, but like someone trained in combat. Marco Benedetti had served in GIGN, Groupe d'Intervention de la Gendarmerie Nationale, from 1995 to 2009, 14 years as France's elite tactical response unit, hostage rescue, counter-terrorism, high-risk operations, codename Lame Blade, for his precision with edged weapons. But in 2009, after a mission in Afghanistan went wrong and he lost 3 teammates, Marco had requested discharge. He wanted a peaceful life, far from violence. Cooking had always been his escape, his meditation. He had come to New York, found work at Bella Notte, and for 12 years had successfully buried his past, until that Saturday night. Saturday evening at Bella Notte was always busy. The restaurant was full, couples on dates, families celebrating, business dinners. The atmosphere was warm and romantic. Marco was in his element, moving gracefully around his kitchen. 5 pizzas in the oven, 3 more being prepared, perfect timing on everything. His team of 2 prep cooks worked in harmony under his direction. Luigi, more basil for table 7, he called out in his Franco-Italian accent. And Maria, check the oven temperature, see? At 9:15 p.m., Marco was putting the finishing touches on a special margarita when he heard unusual sounds from the dining room. Not the normal chatter and laughter, but something sharper, chairs scraping quickly, voices raised in alarm. Then he heard Salvatore's voice, strained and frightened. "Please, take whatever you want, just don't hurt anyone." Marco's hand froze over the pizza. 14 years of GIGN training immediately activated. Threat assessment mode. He moved silently to the kitchen door and peered through the small window. What he saw made his blood run cold. 9 men in dark suits had entered the restaurant. Professional stance, coordinated movement, weapons partially concealed but visible to his trained eye. This wasn't a random robbery. The leader, a thick-set man with graying hair, was speaking to Salvatore in Italian. But Marco caught the words. This was about territory, about the Romano family's arrangements with competing interests. Marco recognized the situation immediately. Mafia enforcement. The Romanos had apparently crossed someone, and now it was payback time. 2 of the men were positioning themselves at exits. 3 were moving among the tables, keeping customers calm but controlled. 4, including the leader, were focusing on Salvatore. Professional tactical formation.
These weren't street thugs, they were organized crime soldiers, probably with military or law enforcement background. Marco assessed the situation. 37 civilians in the dining room, including children and elderly, 9 armed hostiles, unknown number of weapons. Single exit from kitchen leads directly into dining area. In GIGN, this would be classified as a hot zone rescue scenario. High civilian risk, multiple armed hostiles, confined space. Marco looked at his prep cooks, Luigi and Maria, both young, both terrified, both looking to him for guidance. "What do we do, chef?" whispered Luigi. Marco was quiet for a moment, his mind calculating. Then he spoke, his voice suddenly different, not the warm chef's tone, but something colder, more precise. "Luigi, Maria, you stay here, lock the back door, call police in 5 minutes, not before. If shooting starts, you get under the prep table and stay there. Understand?" "But chef, what are you?" "Do as I say," Marco said firmly. "Exactly as I say." He began moving around his kitchen, but not randomly, with purpose, gathering tools. Marco selected his instruments with the same precision he used for cooking, but with a very different purpose. A 10-inch sabatier knife, perfectly balanced, razor sharp, weight 200 grams, effective range in trained hands, 4 meters thrown, unlimited in close combat. A heavy cast iron pan, 3 kilograms, impact weapon, also useful for deflecting. Steel tongs, extended reach, pressure point manipulation, a container of hot olive oil, 180 degrees Celsius, area denial weapon, and most importantly salt, not for seasoning, but for temporary blindness when thrown accurately. As he gathered these, he listened to the conversation in the dining room. The leader was giving Salvatore an ultimatum: pay the fee for protection or face consequences. Classic extortion, but with a twist. They wanted the restaurant as a front for money laundering. "You have been washing dirty money through this place for the Castellano family," the leader was saying. "But the Castellanos, they are finished. Now you work for us." Or, Marco heard the unmistakable sound of a gun being cocked. That was enough. Marco removed his chef's coat, revealing a simple black t-shirt underneath. For the first time in 12 years, he wasn't Marco the chef. He was Lame, GIGN operative. He moved to the kitchen door, took a deep breath, and stepped into the dining room. "Excusez-moi, monsieur," he said loudly, his French accent suddenly much stronger. "I believe you are disturbing my customer's dinner." All 9 men turned toward him. The leader laughed. "Who is this?" "The cook." "Oui," Marco said, walking slowly toward them, hands visible but ready. "I am the cook, and in my kitchen we have rules about proper behavior. Go back to your kitchen, chef, before you get hurt." Marco stopped about 6 feet from the nearest gunman. "I think you misunderstand something, mes amis." "What's that?" Marco smiled, but it wasn't the warm chef smile anymore. It was something much colder. "In France, we have a saying, never threaten a man's family. These people, these customers, they are my family." The leader was getting impatient. "Get this idiot out of here." 2 men moved toward Marco. Big mistake. What happened next took exactly 43 seconds. Marco had been trained to count time during operations. The first gunman reached for Marco's arm. Marco grabbed the man's wrist, applied a pressure point technique that immediately numbed the hand, then drove the heel of his palm into the man's nose. The gunman dropped. The second man tried to draw his weapon. Marco threw the cast iron pan with perfect accuracy, striking the man in the temple. He went down hard. "He's not just a cook," someone shouted. The leader drew his gun, but Marco was already moving. He threw a handful of salt directly into the man's eyes, then followed with the olive oil container. The scalding oil caused the man to scream and fire wildly into the ceiling. Customers were screaming, diving under tables, but Marco was in full combat mode now, moving like the elite operator he'd once been. The third gunman had a clear shot, but Marco used the heavy dining table as a shield, flipping it with one smooth motion. As the man tried to adjust his aim, Marco threw the sabatier knife. It embedded itself in the man's shoulder, spinning him around. Numbers 4 and 5 tried to coordinate their attack. Marco grabbed a bottle of wine from a nearby table and threw it at one man's head while simultaneously using the steel tongs to strike pressure points on the other's neck. Both dropped. The remaining 3 men had regrouped near the front entrance, using hostages as shields. "Stay back," the leader yelled, blood streaming from his oil-burned face. "We'll kill everyone." Marco stopped, raised his hands. "D'accord, you want to negotiate?" "Who are you?" the leader demanded. "I told you, I am the cook. Cooks don't fight like that." Marco's expression didn't change. "I learned many things in France, cooking and other skills." One of the remaining gunmen whispered something to the leader. Marco caught the words. "Professional, military training." The leader's face went pale. "Your police? Special forces?" Marco didn't answer directly. Instead, he picked up another knife from a fallen waiter's tray, testing its balance. "Monsieur, I will give you one chance. Leave my restaurant. Leave my customers alone. Leave Salvatore alone. Walk away and we forget this happened. And if we don't?" Marco's smile returned, but it was the smile of a predator. Then I show you what else I learned in France. The three men looked at their 6 unconscious colleagues, then at Marco, then at each other. The leader made his decision. We're leaving, but this isn't over. Marco said quietly. It is. As they backed toward the door, one of the younger gunmen made a fatal error. He tried to grab a female customer as insurance. Marco moved like lightning. He threw the knife with surgical precision, pinning the man's jacket sleeve to the wooden doorframe. Before the man could react, Marco was there, applying a chokehold that put him unconscious in seconds. The last 2 men ran. Marco stood in the center of his restaurant, breathing heavily. 6 unconscious gunmen on the floor, broken glass and overturned tables everywhere, but no customers seriously injured. Salvatore stared at him in amazement. Marco, who are you? Before Marco could answer, sirens were approaching. Luigi had called the police as instructed. I am your chef, Marco said simply, beginning to straighten overturned chairs. And this is my restaurant, our restaurant. The police arrived within minutes, followed by paramedics and eventually FBI agents. The 9 gunmen were arrested, those who were conscious, and charged with attempted extortion and assault. Detective Sarah Murphy interviewed Marco. She was experienced enough to recognize military training when she saw it. Mr. Benedetti, your response to this situation was unusual for a chef. I protect my customers, Marco said, same as any good restaurant owner. Your technique suggests professional training. Marco was quiet for a long moment. I served in the French military. Long time ago. What unit? I prefer not to discuss it. Detective Murphy nodded. She'd seen enough veterans to know when not to push. Well, whatever you did before, you saved a lot of lives tonight. After the police left, Marco began cleaning his kitchen. Everything had to be perfect again. Order restored. Salvatore found him there at 2 a.m., meticulously sharpening his knives. Marco, Salvatore said softly, thank you. Prego, it is nothing. It was not nothing. Because now you know, I am not just a chef. Salvatore sat down heavily. Marco, I don't care what you were before. I care about what you are now. You are family. You are home. Marco stopped sharpening and looked at his boss, his friend. Then I stay. You stay. He protected us. Like guardian angel, added Mr. Antonelli. Business actually increased. People